Alright, guys, the Australian government's coronavirus tracing app comes out today, so I thought I'd have a little chat with a lawyer, and here it is. Oh, have you looked into that app, like the government tracing coronavirus app thing much?
Yeah, I've sort of been following it. Um, I've been reading about it in the paper and that sort of thing, but I haven't been following it too closely. And there's a couple of reasons why. I've as a lawyer over the last 10 years, I've done a lot of work on privacy and data protection. I think there are I guess two key elements. The first is any government, whether it's federal or whether it's state, well, they don't understand the technical details of what they're doing, especially when it comes to handling data. They just aren't good at it. Thinking of robo-debt, something like that. Their core business is providing welfare to people. It's not to run a massive database of personal information and keep track of everybody's payments. So they're really, really bad at IT projects. So that's the first part to it. Second part to it is it's not as bad as everyone thinks. The servers they're using are AWS servers. About 5 years ago or so, something like that, Amazon set up a company called AWS, Amazon Web Services. Probably about 70% of the internet now runs off AWS servers around the world. Now, a bit of background, or sort of a little bit of a state of play of Australian privacy and data protection laws. Each state has its own privacy and data protection laws, and they've got these provisions called transporter data flows, which means it makes it unlawful in most contexts to transmit personal information across borders, and that's across state borders. So what AWS did, they realized there's a bit of a gap there because their servers at that stage were all based in America and Singapore and Germany. But they realized they're losing a lot of Australian business because of the Australian privacy laws that that meant they couldn't use servers that weren't based in Australia. So AWS quickly set up a server farm in Sydney, and so most of their Australian clients now have their data stored in Sydney on servers based in Sydney. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the Cloud Act, the US Cloud Act, and the sort of fear campaign seems to be, well, the US government has the ability to ask Amazon to provide any data they hold, whether it's held in the US or whether it's not held in the US. That's not what the Cloud Act does. It's part of what the Cloud Act does, but there's also the other side to it, which is AWS can resist that if laws of another country and privacy laws of another country say that the information shouldn't be handed over. So if it's not personal information, if it's just say, for example, a list of cars sold in Australia, hypothetical example, something like that, and that's stored on an AWS server, that would probably need to be handed over under warrant to a US authority if the US authority got a warrant to request that information from Amazon. Personal information, the type of information we're talking about here inside this app, would not be required to be handed over because of Australia's privacy laws. Australia's privacy laws would kind of trump the Cloud Act. There it is in a nutshell. 3 minutes 47 worth of bullshit.
Yeah, to my understanding, when it's got the data just collected, it's going to be chilling in Australia. But then once you need to get it yourself because you've been diagnosed with COVID, and then you need to hand over your list of contact log to the government, then it's going over to uh, other servers or whatever. That's as far as I know, anyways. Um, I haven't seen anyone go on about the legal side or just even the technical side of what the whole thing is meant to do with the whole. It grabs the information of anyone that's within 1.5 meters of you for like 15 minutes. Because, like, what information are you going to grab from another device via Bluetooth? And, like, does it need to be on? Secondly, do you need consent for this? And then another point on that, what if you're just in the same room as someone, you didn't go in 1.5 meters of them, but you coughed all over everything in the fucking room, but you didn't get close enough to that person, you left the fucking food stand and they went to it and then caught your fucking germs from it. But they never picked up that person was in contact with that person. Well, yeah, that's just sort of what I've noticed about how they said this is going to go down. And besides, being in a pandemic where we're all meant to stay put, how much tracking of your fucking movements do you need? How many people did you come in contact with that you can't just remember straight up because you fucking know them?
I love that. You can remember straight up because you just fucking know them. That's absolutely right. No, I don't think this app thing is ever going to get off the ground. I feel like it's a red herring. I feel like there's going to be something else going on. I feel like this app is more likely going to be some sort of smokescreen while they plot to do something else in the background that's possibly a little bit less invasive. I think rolling out the app itself, they've got some real problems. So the problems they've got is following fucking robo-debt. There's a huge trust deficit to start with the government as soon as it comes to personal information or privacy. Nobody trusts them. Nobody trusts them already. So people aren't going to voluntarily take up this app because exactly the reasons that you mentioned, people will be worried about what happens with their personal information. Second part to it is it works in places like Singapore, it works in places like South Korea, it even works in places like China because they've got a population that are used to being told what to do. Even in Singapore, it's arguably democratic, but it's not. It's incredibly strict and the punishments for breaches are incredibly harsh. So I think in countries like that and South Korea and China, it's really easy to get people to comply with a new process. And this really is a new process. But it's never going to work here. It's never going to work here. It'll never work in the UK. It'll never work in France. It'll never work in the US because we have too much of a focus on individual rights rather than population rights. For us, we are saying, no, I've got my own autonomy. I choose who I interact with. I choose who records it, which is a really different way of seeing the world than some of the other places where it's going to be much more effective to have one of these contact tracking or contact tracing type apps. But as far as how it actually goes, my understanding is, it's just going to be used through Bluetooth, which must mean that you've got to have Bluetooth on the whole time. I guess the idea being if you sign up for the app, like if you're willing to volunteer to install the app on your phone, you're also willing to turn on your Bluetooth at all times. But the point you make about not being within 1.5 meters and coughing on somebody and just therefore fucking the whole system is absolutely right. It will help, but it's not going to help too much, I don't think. There are way better ways to deal with this, and we're doing them right now, isolation. But yeah, I think, the only thing that seems to have working in its favour is there seems to be a lot of pretty good science coming out now that says the best way to get back to any sort of normality is greatly increased testing and contact tracing. Now, I don't know if the app is the best way to do contact tracing, but those two things the scientists seem to be saying that's the best way to avoid another explosion. So make that what you will.
There you have it. Thanks for watching. All links will be below as per usual, and let us know if you plan to download it. And of course, thank you to our special guest, the Law Guy. Like, subscribe, and stay safe, everyone.